Okay. So first, I would love to hear how you got started, but I would really, particularly from an inspiration point of view, right?
On this movie?
No, in your career. Well, let's
Okay.
start. Well, let's start. Let's just give an overview. You know, the credits are illustrious. Like I said, you real genius, introducing Dorothy Dandridge. I know you've worked on CSI and done so much TV, and I mean, you're just a trailblazer in the industry.
Uh,
And so, I think a lot of us, right, want to know how you got into it, and why you got into it, particularly. You know, I know that I went to film school, you know, after seeing Valley Girl and being like, I want to be just like Martha Coolidge. So I'm curious, who was that for you? Who were you trying to emulate, or what was your muse?
well, that's a very good question. For me, there were very few women directors.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
There were hardly any that I'd ever heard of, and I've heard of a few since, since. But I think it was more that I loved movies. I loved them. I wanted to make them. That it was just, I was in theater. I directed some theater. I acted in theater. I was a singer, so I sang and on stage. But I really, really loved telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to do that, and had found that when I was in film school, I could make a documentary easier than I could make a fiction film because of all the money that you have to, and time you have to put into creating sets and spaces and getting actors and rehearsing and blah, blah, blah. So for me, it just happened that this particular film was the first fully, almost fully dramatic film, except that it was also a documentary as well. So I did both.
How so? How is it a documentary to you?
Well, it's a documentary in that in it, within the whole idea of making the film, was the truth of it, that it had a truth for me. And for the other people who were playing the parts. And what I did, it wasn't a documentary really, but it was that we created ultimately the scenes by acting them. We rehearsed them, and I taped them. And then what I did is I listened to all that, and I polished the script that way. Just became it, so it was really owned by the actors, and they helped me develop the whole idea. And part of it too is experience. We've all had this experience. First love, or all of it it's universal. And I felt it was something that everybody could understand. And to see it from really more a girl's point of view was unusual. And then to show scenes that nobody else had shown before about things that, fear between the two, or reasons for breaking up, or the peer pressure of your friends is very devastating. So for me, it was a whole exploration of a culture that was my culture.
Okay. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Valley Girl. Particularly, I've always wanted to ask you, because I was aware that there was a Valley Girl craze, right?
Yes, there was.
It was a complete fad. There was and music and TV was trying to really capitalize off of it. But I think that so I was kind of aware that this. Tell us how this project came together. I mean, it came out of that craze a little
actually,
bit, right?
I have to say it was the writer-producers that, came up with the idea for the script, and it was, but it was also happening on Saturday Night Live. I mean, they had some characters, and then there's Moon Zappa's song, and that started to make it all very everything. It was always there.
So was that before you got on board?
The film. It was
Okay.
film hadn't been made yet.
Okay.
And
Were you riding the wave, or was it?
no,
kinda
the
over?
film was so fast because Andy asked me out and then gave me this. I mean, he just asked me out to dinner and then gave me the script. And when I read it, I was so scared that I wasn't going to like it. But there it was. I'd been in Hollywood working at Zoetrope and Francis Coppola's studio and all these things. And here I was offered a movie, a real movie. And I read it, and what was great about it was I could identify with it. I had memories and feelings about, the time of life and what it was like. And even though I wasn't from the Valley, I totally understood what the movie was about. In fact, brought in the whole Romeo and Juliet theme. And it just was honoring the characters that were in it. I loved them all. They were great, even the bad guys, so to speak.
So you just mentioned that you were out here trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
So about how long since you came out here? Tell us what it was like to try to make a movie as a female director in the 80s.
Whoa. Well, I'd done it, back east, and I'd done it here, and I came here because I really did want to do narrative filmmaking. And when I came here, and then I started hanging out at Zoetrope Studios, and that was really fun because you were with a whole gang of people. But what was interesting was here was a film financed utterly. The producers got it put together. And I could see easily how I could make it work with the Valley and Hollywood and the separations and exaggerating the musical separations a little. We always have to exaggerate something. But that was great to have something to really sink my teeth into, because I wasn't writing. I had scripts. I had a couple of scripts that I owned and I wanted to do, but it wasn't so easy. I mean, I'd go around meeting people. That's what I did, meet people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you came out here.
Yeah.
But you rolled up with Francis Ford Coppola, though.
I
that's a
did,
flex.
but I'd met him before. They were looking at people to be in Zoetrope Studios.
They were looking for women?
They were looking for a woman.
A woman.
And and when they saw my films, my documentary films, they said, "We know it's you. We want it to be you."
And what did they want you to do?
Well, I was developing a rock and roll love story there, but I never got to make that.
Because why?
It just Francis had his ups and downs, and he went into a down.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
A down for him is not necessarily a down for us, but
Right. Okay. So then so you already kind of were on the scene. You were already knowing about the LA music scene from that?
And because I was with Fred Roos and had been sitting and casting with him for a year, and I learned a huge amount from him. He was a brilliant casting director. So I had been heard of by the agents, and I didn't realize that. So when they heard my name, they knew I was a director, and we all of a sudden got all the Rat Pack suggested for the film. I mean, we saw all these great young actors come, and it was amazing to see them.
So what was that like for you when you first get here and you feel like, okay, I'm working with Francis Ford Coppola and all these hot young actors want to be in my movie?
I didn't even realize that so much.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand what
how you felt
like about
I was barely making it in the door.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And that it was hard work, but I was determined, because I would say the thing is that I knew I was a director, and I knew it. It was a secret. Not everybody knew that. I knew that. But
How did you know?
I just knew it. I knew it. I directed theater.
I know, right?
I directed enough films, and I knew it. I knew it.
How did you know what directing was, though?
Oh, now that's a very good question. Basically, I was the oldest in my family.
Mm-hmm.
I had a younger sister and 2 younger brothers, and I was bossy, I guess. And
What's your sign? What's your sign?
What's my? I'm a Leo.
Oh, happy birthday!
Yeah, that's true. And but I knew I was a director. I love people. I read psychology. I read, all kinds of books, history. I fantasized about characters. And what made people tick. And I loved how people related to each other. And I just spent my whole life looking into these things and along with going to films and doing all that. So, yeah, it was, I knew it. And I just had to show the world. Mm-hmm. They just needed to get a chance to see that I was a director. I looked at it sort of that way, which maybe kept me going. Mm-hmm. And
what do you feel like the hardest part of that was?
Well, financial, like everybody. Mm-hmm. And keeping going, keeping the enthusiasm and and all that. But I had endless enthusiasm and energy. Mm-hmm. And when Andy brought the script to me for Valley Girl, and I loved it, it was suddenly, God, it was like a dream come true, mm-hmm. getting to make the film.
Okay. And so I mean, it was, a low budget film, right?
Very low budget.
Okay. So let's talk about that. And let's talk about, what was that like? Like, I mean, were you like stealing? Did you have permits? Like, were you, did you have catering, or everybody was eating ramen? Or, I mean, tell it, how many days did you have?
Well, we shot it in 20 days.
Okay.
But we had a little bit of problem with some equipment. So we ended up losing 2 days out of the 20. So we shot it for 22 days. Only we shot for 20 days out of 22. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. And so it was fast. And that meant, there were no rehearsals scheduled. Mm-hmm. There were only 50% or less of the crew got paid at all. Mm. And it wasn't on any kind of a union thing. It wasn't, none of that. Mm-hmm. And we got things all different ways. Yes, it was mostly catered. Mm-hmm. I don't even remember what we ate, but yes. And we had some, stuff on the tables there, was whoever we got. And my 2 friends from film school were working on it. And, I had really good friends working on the movie, and I made really good friends with people on the movie. And it is incredible to look at this movie and look at the cast and where they went, and also the crew, because they all just really went out into the industry and did wonderful things. They just were, it was the break they needed for them.
So, and I feel like that's a credit to you, right? That's the,
and the producers too, mm-hmm. and we all hung together. I mean, there was one point where the whole crew and I, after 2 or 3 days, said, "This is not going to get us. We have to have 2 cameras. We'll never shoot this. We'll never get this film shot without 2 cameras." There were too many characters, mm-hmm. and it just had to have 2 cameras. And so we went back, the producers and I, to the money producers, and asked them if we could get a second camera, and they went a little crazy, saying it was too much money and this and that. And, I don't really know, but what we said is, I promise you, I will not shoot if I don't need the second camera. I'll only shoot 1 camera. but I do need it, and we'll make the schedule. And we did make the schedule outside of the 2 rotten days that equipment didn't work. And there were so many incredible stories that go with this film of shooting. We didn't get.
Can you give us one?
We didn't have permits.
Okay.
All the time. Not all the time. I have no idea if we had a permit when we were driving up and down, shooting all the storefronts, because really, and you'd have to clear all those, but I don't think we did that. And I know when we were shooting up on Mulholland, and they're it's dark, and they're there. I loved that, but we didn't have that. And when they're running around, we were on private property, so we had a lot of lights, but Nick and Debbie are making out in the car, and Fred and well, I keep thinking of their real character names. So anyway, they're running around the car, and we had nothing there. And I know that we were shooting some other scenes too in Colleen Camp's brother's house, but he was in a house with a few other people. And at one point, early in the evening, the cops showed up and pounded on the door. Oh my God, I was so scared, because I knew we didn't have permits for some of what we were. And they came in, and they didn't quite tell me, but the first AD they did. And so what they were doing was arresting one of the people who lived in the house, who had a little drug dealing and things, and and all our Debbie and Nick were being made up in the bathrooms. It was hilarious, and these police, and there's vests and everything, and they take the guy out. It was fine. They didn't bust us.
And you just kept shooting.
We just kept going.
I love that. So wait, so you said that you didn't have any rehearsal?
No, we did, but that's because I have a conviction, and I went and I said, we have to rehearse. I mean, we'd had a few just to get the character, for me to help me polish the script, but no, that I did. I convinced them to get together on the weekends and rehearse in our own houses and stuff, and we did.
So about how much work, because I mean, one of the most amazing things about the movie is the chemistry between, Nick and Debbie, definitely, but even amongst the girls, and I mean, you really kind of relax into feeling like all of these people are friends.
And what I knew a few things. I knew it from theater. I knew it from instinct, that whatever they did, they had to go out, hang out, have food together, talk. It wasn't. I understood that rehearsals in this case was getting to know each other better, and that was very important. And that became a really integral part of what rehearsals were.
So you would encourage them to have separate rehearsals. I read a couple of places they were dating. Was it? I mean,
Nick and Debbie started dating apparently right before we did that scene. Then we shot that at the very end of the movie. But they were dating by then.
Okay.
A surprise for me that night.
Were you worried?
Well, it affected their acting. They couldn't break up. They were having a terrible time breaking up. And then once I found out what the problem was, then we approached it like an acting exercise, and we talked about using other people in your mind that you're breaking up with, and we played all the theater games, and each one of them found their solution.
Okay, I love that story. So also I wanted, since we're talking about the acting, I also want to talk about it in terms of I still wanted to get to the commerciality of of the valleyness, of how that, in lesser hands, that could have been really heavy-handed. That could have been
easily.
that could have been very annoying, right?
Oh, very.
And I mean, I think it's a testament to you as a director. It's a testament to your cast. But I guess I'm curious, like, what did you have to do? What kind of lens or filter did you have to do to be like, okay, that's too much, like, gag me with a spoon. That's too much, How
Well,
did you
first
keep
of all,
it grounded?
okay, you brought up a good example there. First of all, I take filmmaking very seriously, and it was a gas and fun to make, and I wanted it to be funny, but I wanted it to be serious enough that, that it wasn't just a laugh. I mean, meaning not good laugh. So, for example, "Gag Me with a Spoon," that was in Moon Zappa's song.
Mm-hmm.
That was written by Moon Zappa. That was not part of Velspeak.
Oh, okay.
But we discovered that because what I asked all the actors to do was to go to high school in the Valley. And my teachers, I had them teach, a different movie, but I did the same thing with another teen movie. And you imagine coming in and your teacher that day is Abe Vigoda. I mean, that's funny. I'm sorry, but anyway. But we all did that. And they found nobody said "gag me with a spoon." They'd say "gag me," so it was, and then halfway through, well, we were done actually. So I had the film, and we're doing all the final parts, and the Zappas decided to come see the film because they were thinking of suing us. And they saw the film, and nowhere did we steal their language, which was great. I didn't even realize that was such an issue, but it just was something we did naturally because it wasn't real. And I just learned that from making documentaries.
Okay. Okay, I have another internet rumor that I want to ask you about. So apparently, part of getting the film made was that you had to have 4 sex scenes or
yes.
see some boobies.
Yes, I did. I had to shake hands and promise that you would see 4 scenes that had naked tits in them. And I wasn't embarrassed. I just went and, we shook hands because they were afraid for a minute that they said, too much of an artist to make the film. I couldn't get in the spirit of the thing. And I was in the spirit. And so I promised, and it was hard. It was hard to make it to 4 scenes because you can't. It was like trying to find a reason why you would show something like that. So anyway, but we managed, and in the end, they liked the film so much they didn't care.
So you didn't have 4 sets?
I did, but
okay.
That's by half a frame. I made it.
Okay, because I know I was counting, and I didn't see the 4th.
Yeah, it's hard.
But how did you feel when they said that to you, though? I mean, were you offended? Were you, or you just knew what time it was?
Well, I knew what time it was, but I'm from New England. I'm not from Hollywood. I didn't grow up in this world. And I lived in New York some, but I couldn't believe it. How did I feel? Can you believe this? Can you believe the things that you see on TV now? Oh my God. So anyway, I would sit there and say, oh my God, but I was living it. It was real. So,
And they didn't have any qualms about saying that to you, the exploitative aspect of that to a female director?
If men who really want to see it, I said, okay, I'm fine about it. I totally treated it like anything. And then they said, I said, as long as I can make it real for me, which I plan to do, and they said, we don't care how you do it, we just want to see them. So,
Wow.
luckily it was me that did it, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying. You are such a trailblazer, and and you've paved the way for so many of us. So it's so fascinating to hear your stories.
Well, there were so many little arguments, like I wanted one of the 4 Valley Girls to be black. That died. They wouldn't let me do that. But
why?
Why? What do you think?
No. What did they say? No. What did they say? I know why.
What was interesting is when I was going around the valley and going to Valley Girl contests, and half of them were black. I mean, it was like a Spanish, and everything was a Valley Girl. It was like, so I realized it doesn't matter. And they were going, I have blonde hair and blue eyes, and they didn't, and that was fine. And so I wanted to do that. I enjoyed that kind of, I enjoyed that difference, so to speak, of reality and fiction. But they didn't feel comfortable. I think they felt it was the audience. I have no idea. I can't say they, and really, but the point was I did it. So, but what I did do, if you may have noticed, is I got the girl with the hair, the black girl like that. She was always around and always in scenes.
She was trying to get with Tommy.
Yeah, she was trying to get with Tommy. And then there was the boy that was one of Tommy's best friends, and he's sort of a mixed, he's sort of Indian, and I forget, I don't even know. I just he was in there, and it was just filled with as many different kinds of people to make the world look the way the world really looks. And that's what I wanted to achieve in the film. It was not, and believe me, I thought it was a floppo, meaning it didn't get quite as mixed as I wanted it, but then I've been thanked by many people since for working to get those people in the movie. And it's funny, and I've since then worked with, I had deaf kids acting and wheelchair people acting, and there's people think I don't know, it was going to be problematic, but it wasn't. So it was great.
Yes, no, I mean, that was definitely something, the 80s movies all felt very white, and that
Yes.
was, and I do think that was one of the reasons why I watched Valley Girl over and over again, was I did see people that looked like me, my cousins, and also, like you said, that it was from a girl's point of view.
Yeah,
like,
and it's a girl.
The 80s was a good time for, the boy movies.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
just anything with, a girl in the title was something
It forces a filmmaker, author, so to speak, to think about that, because I'd always read books, and I read a lot of books with male heroes, and identified with them. And yet I had to ask myself, really? Do you really identify with them? Because not always. They do things that I wouldn't do, And it did make force you to look at what you had sort of been going along with in order to get along and read things and get into the world as it was.
Mm-hmm. So I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
So one, again, this is Women in Film's 50th anniversary, and again, you've had such an illustrious long career. I'm curious how how you feel your journey has been. How the difference between being a female director in 1983. Between being a female director in 2023, what do you feel, what do you feel changed that enabled, those feelings to happen?
Yeah.
What do you think maybe is a defining moment for you, or a pivotal moment for us as an industry?
Well, I think it has changed, finally. And that wasn't fast. That was recently only. And that was with all the Me Too's and this stuff. And now I do feel they will go out and try to hire women. They want women, and they want color. They want all this. And yet there are parts that are just the same as it's always been. And so you know, as you said, you know the story or whatever I do. So you kind of go and you have to be able to fit in, you know. And I'm not willing to do directing that's dishonest for me. I mean, and luckily, I love doing CSI. That really was interesting. I got to do murder and all this stuff, and that was great. And I loved doing a lot of the television because it got me into totally different genres. Because once one does a teen movie, you're kind of there for a while, and it's. I think it's very difficult. I don't think it's easy, and I know men who think it's not going to change, but I think it is changing and has changed, and I think women have even said, "How did you do that? How do you do that?" Well, one of the things is when you want something, you figure out a way to do it. It isn't, you know, it's like when Marlon Brando talked about acting, and if he would use an ice cream as an example of something.
I haven't heard this story.
Well, he just would think of things that made him sort of lust after things. If he loves food, then it would be that. And, you know, it was trying to tell people what the magic of acting is, but what's interesting is we all do it. You want a raise, and you get along pretty well with your boss, you're going to do what your boss wants. You're going to look perfect, you know? And I think the really hard part is fitting in with a group of people who have been working together for a long time, and they have never worked with a woman, or they've never, you know, and that can be really, it can be painful.
So how do you deal with that? How do you?
Yeah, I haven't had to too many times. If they're just hiring and they hire a woman and they do it on purpose, and then you get to pick some of the crew and all that, then it isn't as bad as all that, you know.
But when you have been in a situation where you've had where someone doesn't respect your authority or is not comfortable working with, I mean, what do you do? What did you do?
Well, I learned early that luckily I don't have to like everybody. Just because I'm the director, I may be the boss, but I don't have to really love everybody. I love most people anyway, but the point is that there'd be somebody who'd be disrespectful, but they'd do their job, you know. And I realized as long as they're doing that and doing it right, I'm going to just treat them right. And that's what I would do. I would be irritated if they were disrespectful. But I didn't just make it into an all-out war, because then you have to act. And when I'd be on a film and I hired somebody, and I've done it maybe twice, who was really wrong person, I've had to go to the producer and be very embarrassed and say, I'm really sorry, I just hired the wrong person. And they went along with it. Because in the end, in a film, if you don't get the people correct, the people who are being your other artists correct, then you're going to get a bad message. It's going to affect the whole film. It's going to affect other people. So you better get it right, and that means replacing a bad nut as quickly as possible.
And so, but how do you choose the right person? How do you know when they're the right person?
Well, you try to choose because people recommend them, because you know them, you've seen their work, but often you'll end up with a stranger, and you'll do some checking up on them, but you're hiring pretty fast. When they're finally ready to go, you're just going. And sometimes you realize, oh my God, I didn't do that. I didn't find that out, you know. And it was, you know, I can think of two situations where it was a big surprise.
They weren't what you expected.
No, one was a guy who really didn't get along with women at all, which was kind of easy for me to find out alone at lunch. But and then another one had to do with a problem with the crew. It was a sexual harassment issue, and you know, you have to act on it.
Okay. Good advice. Good advice. So right here, I have a letter that you wrote to women in film
Really?
in 1977. Right here.
Wow.
And it's you write this. I love this quote. I've only lived in Los Angeles for a relatively short period of time, but I already feel that your group is very important for all of us. So I wanted to ask you about that. You know, in 1977, also, you know, what was women in film like? I mean,
I don't even know.
but you know, what did you feel was important?
Well, I think that it's really obvious. It's been very apparent all these years that we have had a back seat in this business. We're not on the same playing field. And that, and I have to say, there are elements in the film business and entertainment business where it exploits women, and women are perfectly willing to be exploited that way, but it doesn't necessarily get you into just the right position. You know, we're seeing actresses move up better now. I mean, moving up into directing positions and such like that. But it was very important, obvious to me in New York, that we had to have organizations that were where women were authoritative and understood what their importance was to our culture and our society, and where people recognized the value of women and their opinions. We all need company.
I know, we can't do this alone.
No, you
know,
can't
it's a
do it
collaborative
alone.
art.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're running out of time. I could talk to you for, we didn't even talk about the music really quickly.
I'll tell you, the music I had, luckily, I knew some people in the film business, music business, and I'd met a great guy with great ears who worked for the music business. And it was an incredible experience where I brought somebody from the record business in, and my lawyer did. And my lawyer, who helped put the whole film together, had been a big lawyer in the music business. And so it was him crossing that boundary or whatever. And it was magical, getting somebody with some great ears. And they'd funnel music by me, and so did the consultants. And then I would hear things on the radio here, but they don't back announce. They didn't then, and so I'd have to sing the song to the guy and see if he
You had to be your own Shazam.
Yeah, he had to sing the song and remember what that was, and so it was really. It was a real adventure in sort of bringing together the right sounds and the right music to play. And we were never sure if it was going to happen because it was a very low budget movie. And were we going to get the record companies to cooperate? And, it was incredible. And a few people fell out, but we did, in the end, get an incredible record together. And it didn't come out because the producers of the movie, not Andy and Wayne, but the money guys, didn't they fell out with all the music things, and so the whole record fell out. And I think it was 12 years later or 11 years later that Rhino came out with the soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing.
That is.
So it was really, it was great. They put a little thing out in England with a couple of records on it, but it wasn't the real thing. I mean, it was, but it wasn't much of it.
I was curious though, because, the music is such a big part of it, the Plimsolls and Josie Cotton were in, so, and you have a music background were a singer. So, I mean, I'm just curious, like, how did you, what was kind of your organizing principle, or how did you?
What I ideally wanted was to get the music early, so that when they're dancing to that music. And because it was thematic, I wanted it to be more than just a kind of a surface love story songs, for example. And it should have come out of your soul, so to speak. And some of this really did. And some of it is accidental, or, at the last minute, a song fell out, and the Electric Avenue went in. It was just these last minute. That was like during the mix, we put that song in. And so it was a very interesting, crazy time. But what I did do, I learned something, is in the party, what the music supervisor and I did was they did a little research, and we picked rhythms, the most common rhythms for certain songs, not their tunes, but the rhythm.
So that could do like
we played songs with that rhythm and played it.
Okay.
So people danced at that rhythm, and that's, now, because a few things got replaced at the very last minute, it wasn't the right exactly rhythm, but we cheated our way the best way we knew how to get around that. And it was fascinating how much you can integrate music right into your movie as you're making it.
Yes, it's rare. You don't,
is rare.
Unless it's a musical, you don't really see a lot of
okay, one
movies.
reason it's rare is because the music business runs at a very fast pace, and the records are put together. Maybe it drives them all crazy, and it's too long, but it's much faster than a movie. And so they don't want to wait for to say you want the music early, and then the movie's going to come right out
a year later.
Yeah,
right. They don't want to
nobody wants to wait. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And so, and how did you come to work with the Plimsolls? How did they?
I'll tell you, there were certain bands. I'd been going to the clubs for 3 years. I'd seen everybody. And so the Plimsolls were, they played that club, and I'd seen them, and so I talked to them. That was really, what the first band, though, that I went to, because of how I wanted the Hollywood scene to be even rougher and more, punk. I went to X, and they were very interested, but then they thought their Valley clients wouldn't like him anymore. I don't know. It was very funny, but anyway.
Interesting. And so, were these songs written for the movie, or
no?
All
they
of
were.
The songs were.
They had just written them. They were just recording them, so they didn't have a record out, and but we did have recordings.
So you just were listening to demos and picking demo songs that you.
And then I had them sing. They played and sang. We'd take their tracks from their demo record, and use those, and then he would sing.
And then what about Miss Josie?
She did too.
So, and how did you come upon her?
Same way, just listening to records and liking them. Listening to whatever I could find, whether it was on the radio or you know, because somebody ran the tracks by me, but I was listening to music all the time.
Wow. I mean, can you just imagine what that must have been like?
It was pretty great.
Yeah.
Although I must say, most of the music was not great, but that doesn't matter. There were a lot of great ones.
Okay, well, I think they're going to kick us out soon.
Okay.
So let's give it up for Martha Coolidge.
Well, thank you.
And Valley Girl.
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you for this beautiful film. Thank you all for coming.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Women in Film.